So let's start with the second session. So as we discussed earlier, now we are going to design one report builder application. So let's take a detailed problem statement. So we need to design a report builder application which is going to be responsible for creating various kinds of reports like PDF, docx, txt and extra. There can be new report types which can be added later on. Now there will be some data which will be given as an input to the report builder application, and the application is simply going to emit a report of various types. But then, as we know, if we have to create a PDF programmatically, we may have to involve a lot of APIs. So it can be some maybe Acrobat APIs, or it can be some third-party APIs. So one will have to make the data go through variety of different functions or series of functions. So in general, functions that we may have identified, like example, we may have to go for creating a report in memory, we have to parse the data, we may have to validate or revalidate the data, and we may have to save the final report. So if you notice, all these operations are supposed to be in some sort of sequence. Now if we consider these are common operations which are in sequence specifically for PDF, docx and txt, there can be certain cases wherein we may need some extra functionalities in certain report types. So maybe if we consider PDF, docx and txt may have same sort of sequence of the what we call it as operations, but if at all there's a new type which comes up, let's say XML as in report, it may involve some extra operation like revalidate. It may involve maybe addition or removal of some operation in the middle of the set of operations. So considering those things, we will have to define the application, and as well as we need to ensure addition of new report format does not involve recreation of the application itself. We need to ensure a minimum change in the existing base code. So like we discussed earlier as well, we will have to define the application which is very concrete, and it should be rather, I should say, flexible, and then it should not it should not break based on the changes which will come up later on. So how do we do it? So let's understand, when we say we are creating a report, let's take a simple example of one report first. So are we going to go and create an actual PDF out of actual data? Absolutely no. Like we discussed in the last session, we are not going to go and do much of a logic thing here. We are just going to go and design the application. So in order to design the application, we will take some sort of classes. We will just have some empty stubs generated. Then with respect to empty stubs, we will end up adding a couple of maybe lines of code, which is just for the sake of knowing that we have called that operation. So there won't be any kind of a logic as such of persisting a PDF or anything. It's going to be a console application just like editor we defined earlier, and then we will be just making it simple to understand the design. So let's take one simple example of a PDF. Rather, let's consider we need to simply create an application for building a PDF, and the application will ensure that data will go through create, parse, validate and save kind of operations in some sort of sequence. So it's that simple. So let's start with Visual Studio again. I'm going to unload the previous project as it will be part of the compilation. So I'm going to unload it, and I'm going to recreate a new demonstration. Let me create a new project. Let me take console application, which is going to be C# application again. Let's call it as demo02. Now, as we discussed earlier, I'm just going to go and club this program class, and I'm going to maybe add one simple class first. Let's consider we need to create a PDF class. So one class which is called as a PDF class, PDF report most probably, and then PDF report needs to have operations like, since we don't know what methods are going to go and return, since these are the methods which are going to get called in some sequence, I'll just have a return type as in void. So public void create for the purpose of creating a report. No code as such. And then 4 different methods: create, parse, then validate, then save. And then in each of the method we will plan to add on some code like PDF created successfully. Maybe we will end up writing code in parse as PDF parsed successfully, and so on. We will anyway write down the code for all these methods in similar manner. PDF saved. Now let's say we are done with all these methods that we have. Now when it comes to maybe calling these methods, it is really necessary to call these methods in sequence. So imagine a scene that if somebody is willing to create a PDF with some data, we don't have a data taken as the input, considering we will change the signature later on. What if somebody wants to create a PDF report? Somebody will simply have to create a PDF report object. Let's call it as PDF report or a report in general. And then the person who wants the report to be created in the application, for example class program, the person will have to call create, then the other method called as parse by himself. So one developer will end up writing PDF report, and the other developer who wants to use the PDF report will have to keep on calling create, parse, validate, save in the sequence compulsorily. But what if the person doesn't call it in a sequence? What if the person tries to escape the route and then tries to call save directly? It's not the developer who is writing main method, it's not that developer's fault. It's that these methods are available as public methods. So obviously anybody can call any method with the object. So nobody conveyed this developer who is a main method developer that we need to call these methods in some sequence. So obviously somebody took a shortcut and called save method. So we really want assurance that these methods get called in sequence. If you let people call this method, people can call it in any manner. So in that case, don't let people call these methods. So how about it if at all we make these methods maybe little so-called you can say available to the PDF report itself? Does that mean I am talking about making private methods? Maybe. Let's talk about one easiest option. Let's make one private method. Now if we have this, let's say private method, obviously these methods can be called within the PDF report itself. Now how do we ensure a sequence? Option 1. With the PDF report object, one is going to create a PDF with some variety of data. So obviously the person can't call these methods now, and we want assurance of calling these methods in sequence. So few options that we have. Either we call in a PDF report maybe these functions within each other, and then we can expose one of the function which is going to be a last wrapper function specifically as a public function. Simplest example, we can call maybe inside so-called maybe save, we can call validate first. Inside validate we can call parse, inside parse we can call create, and then there will be some sequence assurance that we will anyway have. And one of the method which is like save, if we consider save as a last method, or save to be available as publicly. So we can make one method public and we can have rest of the methods called in sequence. But that's not OOP at all. That is something which is some sort of hack that you're putting in a code just to ensure that the things get called in sequence. Okay. Is there anything else? One option can be we can have some static counter which will simply be get increased based on which method gets called, and then unless and until that counter value it finds, it won't call the respective method. But these are all again kind of, you can say, routine, maybe procedural kind of a code thing. But then we really want to involve OOP into it. So here is a thing that we can do. Let's do one thing. If we look at from one angle, it's like these methods are not supposed to be called by the user or the developer. When I say user, user means other developer who is using this PDF report class. So considering what we want is, we don't want the user to call these 4 methods in any order at this level. Okay, so let's keep it private for a while. Still, we want PDF report to be created. So how about it if we make one more public method? Let's call this method as maybe generate report. And this method will keep on calling these methods in sequence. So let's call create, let's call parse, let's call validate, and let's call save. Okay, fair enough. So we have generate report available publicly with the object of PDF report, and that will internally call these 4 methods. All good. So here with the report class object, we will have generate report method available only. And then simply to have console there as it is, I'm just going to have console.readline. Now let me run this piece of code. Let's run this. You will see that all 4 methods are going to get called in sequence. Looks good. Simply by having some wrapper method which is publicly available, I just made sequence thing available with the PDF report. Okay, let's talk about one more report now. If this is PDF report, somebody like to have maybe docx report, and in a similar manner, initially what we thought of is similar sort of sequence will be there for almost all report kinds. So ultimately I will end up writing docx here. Now why am I writing another class? Why can't I just have an implementation in this create, in this parse, in this validate and save itself? Problem is, if I write a create method for creating a PDF as well as docx, I am going to violate the laws of OOP. Ultimately, I will make this create function God function, so that create will know how to create a PDF. At the same time, create will also know how to create docx. So ultimately, I'm going to make create God function, and that's what we want to avoid. So ultimately what we tried is, instead of writing it in a PDF report class, we constructed a docx report class now, which has got similar create, parse, validate, save method, and then it will have its own implementation. So I'm just going to write down here, maybe docx, here also docx, here also docx, and some implementation like docx saved. All done. And then we will have a similar method here which can be called. Hold on. Is it not true I just copied something? I copied create, parse, the signatures I copied, and then ultimately I just tried to change the implementation. So does it not a crime? Yes, it is. If you copy paste something, which means you are actually you are making a mistake. So ultimately I just wanted a signature from the PDF to be taken into docx. Okay, if I'm looking for a signature, is it not true what we talked in the last session? If I'm looking for functionality, I will have this as a base defined. If I'm looking for signatures only, I will have this thing defined as an interface. Does that mean PDF report should be added as an interface? Hold on. If I make this as an interface, what will happen is I'll have to maybe only have declarations over here by the rules of C# or Java. And then what I'm going to do now is I want functionality as well in the base PDF, as it is a class not which is going to act as a base, but it's just a class written specifically for PDF reports. So if I keep the PDF report as a class, and if I'm looking for the signatures to be taken as it is, so can I have something like this, PDF report? Then as we discussed earlier, we need to read out this statement of inheritance. Docx is a PDF report. Now this is nonsense. Docx is not a PDF report as such. This doesn't make any sense. Rather, docx and PDF it itself, or these are reports ultimately. So instead of we making docx inherit from PDF, how about it if we identify some base here which can be some class like report, and then we can always have so-called these functionalities may be added over here. Hold on again. Is it that this report class is going to go and have these create, parse implementations? Absolutely no, because PDF will have its own implementation, docx will have its own implementation, a report simply can have declarations. Okay, hold on. If it can have a declaration, by rule, we should declare this as an interface, let's say. Okay, if it's going to go and have only is going to be interface, then in interface, we don't define in here the specifier. So I will not have a body here. I will just have a declaration done. Okay, so PDF report implements a report. And then at the same time, you will notice that we will also have docx report implements report. So in short, when you read it, it's like docx is a report. But then since report is an interface, it becomes compulsory to implement these methods. By default, implementations of the methods that we have in interface is going to be public. But if at all it's going to be a public create method, is going to be a problem. Because if it's going to be a public implementation here, what will happen is anybody can call any method at any time. And that's the reason we made these methods private, if you see. Okay, now that's going to be a problem. Can I put a specifier here, please? You can't. If you put a private here, ultimately, you can't have an implementation out here. At the same time, if you don't make it anything, it's going to be by default public implementation. Now the thing is, if at all, if I just see potential fixes is going to be implement the interface, you will notice there is going to be some by default implementation that we can have. It can be either so-called maybe kind of explicit implementation or implicit implementation. So I'm just going to go and remove this code. Now, still okay, we can figure it out. If you look at the other problem, I took 4 different functions at a common location from docx and PDF. These 4 are taken into report, let's say. How about this function, which is going to be like common function all over? Shall I also take this function at the base? Is it not true that right now what we can see is the logic itself is common between generate report of PDF and generate report of docx, as it's a common logic for most of the reports as it was mentioned in the problem statement. So instead of we having it as a part, or instead of we having a copy paste of this function, why can't we move this function up in the base? So if I move it in the base, now look at the problem. If it's in the base, base has got declaration and base also has got a definition. So ultimately it won't be acting as an interface anymore. It should be rather a class. It should not rather even a class, because a normal class will not have a simple declaration. It should be acting as abstract class. So a class with some declaration and a class with some definition we are going to go and have partially complete and partially incomplete. Then the zigzag line out here is going to go and tell you that a specifier is important. Will I have private specifier? If it is private specification or specifier here, we can't have this create function taken with a signature into PDF report. Can I have it public? You can make it public and abstract if you want. The only concern is if you make it public abstract, it will be public function all over these functions. And then same problem, anybody can call any function over here in a main. Okay, any other solution? That's the reason we are going to make it protected. So it's going to be available in the derived, but at the same time, it won't be available with the object for calling purpose. Hence, we are going to go and make it protected. So similar to that, we will have protected create, protected abstract parse. We will also have protected abstract validate, and we will also have protected abstract save. These are the methods that we will have. Okay. If I have these protected methods declared only, can these declared methods or only declarations with the method can be called by generate report? Just imagine a scene. Who can call generate report? In order to call generate report, one will have to create an object of report class. So that then we will have a problem like create itself is not defined yet over here. Agree? Look at the problem again. We are thinking of a problem that is create may raise a concern since it is not defined yet, but create is called inside generate report. When generate report gets called, whenever you create an object of report. Can you create an object of report class? It's abstract class, remember? Okay, then the next thing, that problem is sorted out. Then when exactly generate report will be available then? You will have to inherit report into other classes. So with report, we will have protected create, protected parse, protected validate, protected save. We will have public method which is generate report, which is going to come down as a public inheritance from here. So ultimately, I will not write this method here at all. I'm going to simply make this protected. So I'll copy this and make each of the method protected. More, I'll just make it protected here and here. Then the other zigzag line that we have here is going to go and tell you that is these are protected abstract methods. Any abstract method that we have needs to have a word written like override in case of C#. So I'm going to put down a word here, override. Here also override, here also override. Same with these methods. And then we have kind of, we can say base defined now. So we just identified base is going to be abstract. We identified the methods which are supposed to be implemented are going to be protected. These methods can be called internally within the class itself. And then we can define a sequence at the base level itself. Okay, all good. So we identified the correct base. We have written the PDF and docx. Now, in case we create an object of a report, PDF report, we have a generate report method as you can see. If I just make a change it to docx report, here also new docx report, and if I just say report dot, I again have this method available called as generate report. So if you notice and if you run, you will find out on a screen we will have docx 4 methods called in sequence. Next, if I just make it as PDF report and if I run this code, I will have same 4 methods or similar 4 methods called with respect to PDF creation. All seems good. Now person may want sometimes PDF, sometimes docx. If you recall, the demo 1, we defined a factory. So I'm going to create one more class which is going to act as a report factory. And then report factory is going to have a simple method which is going to return some sort of report. So I'll have a method called as get report. And then in here, I'll just have a choice taken from the user. So imagine a scene. If the choice is equal 1, I'm going to return a new object of PDF type. Else case, I have a plan to return a new object of type docx report. One more time, same situation. We return PDF, we return docx. What's the common in between these two? So PDF and docx actually come from same base. So I'm going to have here something called as report as in base. So implementation of a report from a PDF and docx will be returned back to, so called you can say, the end user. So instead of we creating these objects as a hard-coded object, I may expect here user to create a report factory. Let's call it as a report factory equal to new report factory. Let's have a choice put up on a screen as in 1 means PDF report and 2 means docx report. Let's take a choice from a user equal to console.readline. And I'll put that entire choice in the convert.int32 format. Then this choice can be offered to the report factory .get report function. So I'm going to pass on the choice. And then what this thing returns me is some sort of report. So instead of holding it as a PDF report, I'm going to have here a report object. So I will not say new PDF report, I will have report factory.get report here. So it doesn't matter now what sort of content we have. If I say report dot, I just have a function here which is called as generate report, which is what we are going to call. So please have a look. I have not actually hard-coded any PDF and docx over here. I'm just taking a choice from a user. I'm getting a report object, holding it in report, and then I'm simply calling a generate report. So run this, put a choice here, let's say 2, I'll get docx. Run again, put a choice like PDF, and then we have PDF. If you look at the code in a little sequence, Let me put a breakpoint here. Let's try to understand. So let's run this. F5. I'm going to put a breakpoint at this location. So I'll put here 2. If I hit enter, I have a choice 2 taken. As you can see here, choice value is going to be 2. Let's say F11 and go to the getReport function. So as the choice is 2, it's going to go to else loop. It's going to get me docx report. Then the docx report is what is in the report reference now. So a report reference is actually pointing to docx report. Now when I keep on calling generate report, look at it goes to generate report. Always and always, any method you call, normally the method is first searched in the object with which you have called the method. So as we see here, I have called generate report with respect to report object, which is internally holding docx kind of object. So ideally it should go to docx. It does go to docx report. It tries to identify using reflection concept. It tries to see that can I call this method with respect to docx. Ultimately docx cannot have that, or can't have, or don't have this method. If it can't find the method that you have called, normally that method is automatically searched into report. So since it finds it in a report class now, it goes to report and finds if there is an implementation of generate report. So generate report gets called. Now we are calling create. So create method, where it will find. One more time, same kind of a condition. If you are calling a method with respect to some object, that method implementation is always searched in the current class itself, to which that object belongs. So create will be searched first into docx. So let's see what happens if I put F11. So I'm calling F11. Look at this. Now docx expands and create gets called. Since create is implemented inside docx, so the method gets called. Sometime back, generate report wasn't part of docx, so it was basically searched in the base class called as report. So let's call this function. Function call is over. Then there is a parse function. One more time, it jumps to base. From parse, it comes back to the docx. Validate, then it jumps to validate. Then it goes to save. Let me maximize this. See, I'm in report. Save gets called. Docx save is what is going to get called now in here. And then ultimately everything terminates. And then it puts up on a screen docx is created, parsed, validated, and saved. So it's very simple to actually maybe define functionality like base here defines which method gets called and in which manner. So imagine a scene, if at all you are designing these classes, the base class. Ultimately one of your developer in a team who is a junior developer, if you just want to ask a junior developer, just define some sort of report, which can be a txt report. Instead of he or she identifying what sort of functionality is when to write and what to write, instead of that, simply hand over this abstract class report, maybe in a compiled format, without explaining the detailed kind of a logic. And then once you hand over this report class, just tell the pal something like create a class. It can be txt report class, and simply tell you just have to inherit from report, implement the report. So thankfully the editor like Visual Studio has the best thing to do is potential fixes, implement the abstract class, and just look at it. We have the stub available for create, for parse, for save, and for validate. The developer need not know something like when exactly these methods are going to get called. That developer will simply have to end up writing code or actual logic for create txt, parse txt, save txt, or validate txt. And then since these methods are protected, txt report object, if he or she tries to create, or third person is going to go and create, ultimately there is no way to call these methods outside because we have made it protected. So who defined the signature? Some base has defined the signature. And how are we calling all these methods? These methods are going to get called using the report itself, base function that we have. So imagine a scene, if I have here txt report constructed, and then with the txt report r dot, I have a generate report to get called. It's that simple. Obviously, what if I need to offer a choice here? This choice can be added as in maybe let's say txt. But is it not true? This is something like, changing the existing logic, like new report keeps on coming, and then a new menu item is something that we will keep on adding. Ideally, this menu can be defined through some configuration file. Changes will always be there in case of factory classes. If you really want to get rid of these kind of changes, even like if-else statements or choice statements or simple loops, best option is use a reflection. We will actually identify reflection in much more detail later on in other series, which is with respect to C# miscellaneous topics. So if you look at here now, writing a new report is going to be that simple. Like you just have a class return, you inherit or extend from report, and then you implement those 4 methods that we have. You need not worry about the basic sequence that we planned for. Now, let's take another example. What will happen if we are really looking for some other class, let's call it as txt, maybe a report. And then just like the way we authored earlier, suppose if I have a report, I implement this report. Now, I have these 4 methods as we already know available. But then barring these 4 methods, I'm just going to go and copy the logic now. So imagine a scene, we have got these 4 methods available here. Okay. And then instead of calling it as docx, I will just have txt. So actually, I have just copied the signature. Though the logic doesn't matter right now. Now, if we just have these so-called methods created, imagine a new requirement that txt report has got one more method to be available, which is going to be something like public void, maybe revalidate. And this method, let's say, is supposed to be called after validate. So ideally, the sequence is defined in the base, and that sequence is like create first, then parse, then validate, and then save. How are we going to want to inject here a revalidate method after the validate and before save? So who needs it? Let's say txt report needs it. Is it once in a while? Maybe you can try to put a hack here as a base class developer. That is, we will just try to put here maybe a revalidate call. Now, who needs it? PDF doesn't need this, docx doesn't need it, txt needs it. Okay, if it's once in a while, you may have to think like revalidate. We can always have this method as protected. If I just make it abstract, so if I just make abstract, maybe let's say revalidate, just look at the problems we will have. The problem is revalidate will have to be implemented by PDF and by docx as well. Now, that's nonsense. These reports don't need this method, but still they'll have to implement it. Maybe empty, but they'll have to create it. And likewise, if at all, just like txt, if hundreds of other report will keep on asking for number of different methods like revalidate, maybe reparse, maybe resave, whatever, you'll find out other reports are going to go and face a problem. Unnecessarily, these other reports will have to simply go and implement the empty logic. Can we do something about it? Okay, since it's going to be optional, like some reports need it, some reports may not need it. How about it if at all we make a point here? Instead of we making it abstract, how about it if we make it virtual? If I make it virtual, ultimately a virtual function needs to have a definition. So I'll have a definition. This is going to be empty definition. If I just make it clear, if it's empty definition and if I just call it here, ultimately you may plan to override if you want, which means what will happen with txt report, PDF report, it will not implement it, docx will not implement it, and txt report, since wants that validation or revalidation, it will override that pure abstract, rather not, I would say virtual method, which is going to be revalidate. So instead of calling base revalidate here, I will just have a logic written something called as txt revalidated. And then in here, I'm just going to go and have a choice of txt report. So I'm just changing the factory class for the sake of quick check or quick demonstration. So I'll call it as txt. I'm not looking for the third parameter now. So I'll just remove this and let's run it. So if I call PDF, please have a look. I'll get 4 functions called. If I call txt, I'll get 5 functions called in the same manner. It seems it's working well. Now look at the problem. We just have increased the problem. I just created a virtual function in the base class because there was a need in a derived class, that is the derived class needed revalidate. Similar manner, what if hundreds of reports need hundreds of different functions and hundreds of different hierarchies, which means in a sequence I just made validate and revalidate called in this manner. What if hundreds of other functions we need to keep on calling like this? And then PDF reports, PDF says I need a function, docx says I need a b function, and txt says I need a revalidate function. Then are we going to go and make a change in the base based on the derived's demand? That's nonsense. If we keep on changing the base based on every demand that comes up from a derived, then that base is of no use. Okay, then how do we solve this? Now in order to solve this problem, what we have to do is, who wants the sequence to be changed? The derived wants the sequence to be changed. Okay, if derived wants to change the sequence, where is the sequence code written? In generate report. What if we let the derived write generate report itself? Okay, how? We already have this as a public method with some implementation. If the derived decides to change the sequence, which means derived wants to have a common signature but then wants to change the implementation. Okay, then we already have a feature here which is virtual. So why can't we just make generate report as virtual function? Does that mean we will not have revalidate declared or defined here? Absolutely no. We don't know. We don't need it here. That way we won't be actually defining revalidate here. Okay, so this is going to be a common sequence for every other report. If the report class decides to change the sequence, let that report go and override this method called as generate report. Base is going to be like this only. And then let PDF be as it is, let docx be as it is, and when it comes to txt, let txt go and write down the code now. So now here txt report may decide, that is, I need a method here which can be simple private, it can be void, it can be revalidate, and then let txt report simply go and define the txt revalidation logic. So since txt wants it, txt has it. Okay, how about a sequence? In case you are looking for a sequence, let this txt class go and override generate report. Okay, if it goes for generate report needs to call here create, parse, validate, revalidate, and save. Okay, how do we call this? We will have to go and call. We can call these methods as, the first method is create. So we are calling base create, and base will give a call to implementation. So create, then we'll have parse, then we will have validate, then we will have revalidate, then we will have save as in method. So if you look at it, as we discussed earlier, as and when you get an object of some report kind here, when you get a report object which is of type docx, ultimately we are calling generate report. And what did I say earlier? Normally whenever method gets called, that method definition is searched in the class where this object or this object belongs to. So if the object belongs to docx, generate report will be searched inside the docx. And then if it can't find one, it will actually go to base like this. And then base says 4 functions to be called, it will call 4 functions. Hold on. What if I have a txt? If you get a txt report and call generate report definition will be by default searched into txt report. Since generate report exists here, this method will be called with a 5 sequence, and then we will have this method called somewhere in the middle after validate and before save. So what if txt like many reports. txt like many reports needs to be created and which needs to have a revalidate kind of method. Quick question again, can we inherit txt further? Can we make txt itself as some other base for other classes? Why not? We can actually have txt itself acting as a base, and then if those other classes need a revalidate as well, why are we making this private? We can always make this protected. And then since those classes may plan to override this method later on, we may have to simply go and make it virtual too. So we may make this protected virtual revalidate, and we can very well go and let other classes do other or third level classes do the writing of revalidate. So you can decide here if the method from a txt report is going to be a virtual, if it's going to be only available to the current class, and so on. So based on how much reusability you are looking for, you can decide to define those methods. So finally, I'm just going to go and run the code. It's going to be one PDF. I'll have 4 methods called. If I just go and maybe call txt, I'll have 5 methods called. So in general, we just try to understand through this demonstration something like whether to use an interface or abstract class. So initially we planned the interface and then we moved on to the abstract class. Usage of protected. So here you must have realized the importance of protected as in specifier. Then instead of we going for simple implementations, we thought of like, where exactly overriding comes in picture. So whenever signatures are same, bodies of the functions are going to be different, which means implementation is going to be different. One can plan to go for overriding. And then we just try to use protected along with abstract. Base class that we have is trying to control derived classes functions calling, in the sense in which order the functions get called. This is defined by the base class itself. And then there's a revision of, you can say, maybe the first demonstration takeaways. Like we just defined, if you look at every class is single responsibility principal base class. Each class has a single unique responsibility. Single responsibility doesn't mean single function. If you look at, we also followed open close principle. The classes are open for extension but closed for modifications, which means whenever there is a sequence change required, we are not going to go and touch the base. Rather, we are simply going to go and define a new class, and then it's not going to go and maybe change the existing logic at all. It's that simple. So we are going to close this session here, and the next session we will be talking about a logger, which is more from a singleton perspective. Thank you.